Let's be real. Life is full of uncertainty, right? From the weather forecast to the stock market, it's a whole lot of what ifs. But what if I told you there's actually a science to handling all that uncertainty? Well, today we're going to dive into probability, a super powerful tool that helps you make sense of all the maybes you face every single day.
I mean, think about it. You run into these kinds of questions all the time. You just bought a new phone. Should you shell out for that extended warranty? Or, what are the actual odds that my team is going to pull off a win this weekend? Are they really the underdog the experts say they are?
And of course, the big one, is playing the lottery just throwing money away, or is there a sliver of a chance it's worth it? See, these aren't just random guesses. Every single one of them is a question of probability.
So let's talk about what's really going on here. All of those maybes, all those moments of uncertainty, they all fall under one big umbrella, a field of math that was literally designed to tackle this stuff.
And at its heart, probability is just that, the science of uncertainty. It's a way for us to measure the likelihood that something will happen. It gives us a language to talk about what's a long shot, what's pretty likely, and what's a complete sure thing.
And the best part? It's all measured on this beautifully simple scale. A 0 means an event is totally impossible. It just can't happen. A 1 means it's absolutely certain. It is definitely going to happen. And everything else, all the interesting stuff, all the maybes of life, they just fall somewhere in between 0 and 1.
Okay, so why should you care? Why does any of this matter when you're not in a math class? Well, because understanding chance isn't just for statisticians or pro poker players. It is a crucial life skill for just thinking better.
Seriously, thinking in probabilities will sharpen your mind in some really practical ways. First, it makes your decision-making so much better. Instead of just going with your gut, you can actually weigh the odds. It also builds your critical thinking skills so you can spot when a news headline is blowing a tiny risk way out of proportion. And finally, it improves how you solve problems because it forces you to think about all the possible outcomes, not just the one you're hoping for.
So, how do we actually figure out these odds? Well, it turns out there's more than one way to do it. You can think of it like looking at the world through 3 different lenses for uncertainty. First up, we've got theoretical probability. This one is all about pure logic. You figure it out before anything actually happens just by looking at the possibilities. So, think of a raffle. If there are 80 tickets in a hat and you bought 2 of them, you can logically deduce that your chance of winning is 2 out of 80. That's 2.5%. You don't even need to wait for the drawing to know your odds.
But life isn't always as neat as a raffle, right? So for that, we have empirical probability. This is all about looking at what's happened in the real world, at the actual data. If a basketball player has nailed 14 out of her last 20 free throws, her empirical probability of making the next shot is 14 divided by 20, or 70%. We're basing our guess on her actual track record.
And that's really the key difference right there. Theoretical is what should happen based on perfect logic, like with the raffle. Empirical is what did happen when we look at the cold, hard data, like a baseball player's batting average. One is a thought experiment, the other is the result of a real one.
Now, the third lens is one we all use every day, probably without even thinking about it. It's subjective probability. This one isn't based on formal math at all. It's your gut feeling, your personal experience, or just your intuition. It's that feeling when you just know your favorite team is going to win, even if the stats say otherwise. It's personal, but let's be honest, it's not very scientific.
All right, now for the really cool part. How do businesses, especially places that literally bank on chance like casinos, use these ideas to make sure they always come out on top? Let's pull back the curtain and see how probability gets put to work.
They use this incredibly powerful tool called expected value. Now, that might sound a little intimidating, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's just a way to predict the average outcome of something if you could do it over and over and over again. You just take every possible result, multiply it by its chance of happening, and then add all those little pieces together.
And here is the secret to the whole thing. Casinos do not rely on luck. They rely on math. They very carefully design their games so that the expected value for you, the player, is always negative. Let me show you how. So let's imagine a simple game. It costs $10 to play. If you win, you get $150, so your net winnings are $140. Awesome. But let's say the probability of winning is a tiny 3%. That means, of course, the probability of losing your $10 is 97%. To find the value of each outcome, we just multiply the money by the probability. So for a win, that's plus $140 times 3%,
which is $4.20. For a loss, it's minus $10 times 97%, which is negative $9.70.
Okay, so what do we get when we add those two possible outcomes together? A positive $4.20 and a negative $9.70 gives us an expected value of negative $5.50. And that number, that is the casino's secret weapon. It means that on average, every single time someone plays this game, the house expects to make $5.50.
And they can be sure of this because of a powerful concept called the law of large numbers. All this really says is that the more and more you repeat something, like thousands of people playing that game every single day, the closer your real-world results are going to get to that predicted expected value. So that tiny minus $5.50 loss for you, multiplied by thousands and thousands of players, becomes a massive predictable profit for the casino. It's not magic, it's just math at scale.
So, what does this all mean for you in your life? Well, understanding these ideas is kind of like unlocking a new superpower for seeing the world more clearly and navigating all its uncertainty.
You can start applying this thinking literally everywhere. When you're making financial decisions, you can better weigh the potential reward of an investment against its actual probability of paying off. If you're into games or sports, you can make smarter strategic bets instead of just going with your emotions. Even with health and safety, you can better understand if a risk you read about is something to genuinely worry about, or if it's statistically tiny. It's really all about making smarter, more informed choices.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Now that you have these tools, what's one maybe in your own life that you'll approach just a little bit differently? Maybe it's deciding whether to buy insurance, or just understanding the news a little better. How is the science of uncertainty going to change the way you see the world?